Hey everyone, Clio here, and today we are looking at my sort of like quarterly stats. What's more important is it is a way for me to check in with my sort of reading goals for this year and how I'm doing when it comes to those. In light of that, I will be linking my 2021 reading goals video up above in case you want more information about what my reading goals were and why I set those specific reading goals. But so the first one is actually one that I didn't set in that video, and that is my Goodreads goal. My Goodreads goal is just like, I don't consider it to be an active goal or anything like that. I just put it there at the beginning of the year, and at the like a couple of years ago it was really a goal. I would really strive for that, but that would be kind of my only goal. But now I am less concerned with the quantity of what I'm reading and more with the quality of what I'm reading, and so I have set it to 52, which is something that I easily managed last year. There have definitely been a whole lot of years in which I didn't manage 52, so if I don't manage 52 I'll also not be heartbroken about it, but I have already gotten to 30 books this year, so I'm pretty sure I'll get to the 52. So 30 books so far this year, basically 10 a month. I actually think it is a little bit too high because we will get back to that, but one of my goals kind of suffered as a result of how much I've already read so far this year. But so first up, the most important goal on my agenda for this year is reducing the amount of unread books on my physical shelves. But so I started the year with 84 books. My goal is to get it down to under 40. In order to do that, I need to reduce it by 11 each 3 months, and I have reduced it by 12 so far this year. So I am on track for reaching that goal, on track for getting under the 40 books, and so very happy with that. I have had like one month, the month of February, in which I didn't reduce it by almost anything, and so I'm going to try to avoid getting in that sort of a situation again in order for me to not, like in the month of March I definitely felt some sort of a responsibility for me to up the ante and make up for what I had lost in the month of February, thus making me feel a lot more stressed about reading enough again. So definitely that's something that I want to tackle. I want to be more or less reducing it by 4 books every month so that I don't have to have big months and lower months, so that's hopefully what I'll be doing from now on. Another aspect to that goal of reducing my physical TBR was also trying to curb my buying habits, but I'll get back to that later in this video when I talk about another goal. Second main goal for this year is fantasy. I want to be reading more fantasy. The goal that I put down for that was over half of the reads that I'm doing need to be fantasy. Reason that I give for that as well, that in that video, and I go into it a lot more in that video, is definitely that I just want to catch up on all the things that I've been missing, because I feel like if I don't prioritize it, I'll always just like push it back for certain other reads that I have. And so this year I've definitely been zooming in on fantasy. I think most of my TBRs have been mainly fantasy, but I have definitely still been reading quite a lot outside of that. I think I said in that video that in 2020 I read about, I think in that video I mentioned that in terms of the page count I got to about 25% of fantasy reads. This year has definitely been a lot more. In terms of page count I got to 55% fantasy so far this year. In terms of actual books it is at 40, meaning that, you know, in terms of the amount of books I'm still reading more other works than fantasy, but because all the fantasies are such big chunkers and the majority of the other books are more like on the lower end of the page count, that definitely means that still most of my time is invested in reading fantasy books, which I'm not gonna lie, I'm happy about. But I will also say that sometimes I'm already like itching to pick up more translated literature, to pick up more literary fiction, so it'll always, I guess, be a sort of juggling match. Probably next year I'll focus it on something else, but yeah, I'm very happy that I am doing that sort of catch up and that I'm allowing myself to finally fully dive into fantasy this year. In terms of my third goal, I think my third goal, I'm not entirely sure of the order of these goals anymore, but I think my third goal was the fact that I have a list of 12 books that I want to get to in 2021, and I also have a list of 5 classics that I want to that are like the priority of my classic list. I will definitely say that I've been doing very well there, because in terms of my 12 books of 2021, I have already finished 4 of them, which is actually a third of what I need to finish, but I've also put down one of the other ones, so I've actually already tackled 5 out of 12. I'm almost halfway through that list at this point in time, even though we're only a quarter into the year, so that is definitely going well. I do definitely have some of the more like chunkier books on that list are still there, so it's not the case that I don't have my work cut out for me anymore. And in terms of classics, I only put 6 on there, I think. Yeah, 6 classics are on there, and I have tackled 2 of them, the 2 longest ones that were on that list, so that's also a nice progression through that list already. But yeah, I'm very happy about that progress, because I said it in my reading goals video, is that I have never completed a 12 books for the year video. You know, I always set that list and then I kind of forget about it throughout the year, or I just get around to like half of them. And so this year I did put some incentives on there, which I explained in that video, and that has clearly made it that I've been able to prioritize those more, that they are more present. I also have them in a Notion spreadsheet, so that when I'm kind of tackling the books that I've read throughout the year and kind of removing them from there, I always also have a view of, you know, what are those books that I prioritized and making sure that I get around to them. The 4th goal is to read the books that I do purchase quicker. So as I said in the beginning of this video, that I was going to get back to the amount of books that I've purchased this year. Some of these were pre-orders that I'd set before I set my goals for this year, and some of these were from subscription boxes. So in that sense, 4 books were added to my TBR that way, and I've also purchased 2 more. So I had kind of hoped not to purchase any books in the first half of 2021, so that didn't end up happening. So I did end up buying 2 more than the ones that I originally set out for myself. But I do, out of those 6 total, I only have 2 left to read. One of which is actually a book that I'm like, in some sense I'm already a quarter through that book, but it's also sort of, it's called The Periodic Table of Feminism, and so it just tells the story of a couple of feminist figures throughout history, and so it's a type of book that I'll just be slowly making my way through over the course of a couple of months, so it's the type of book that's gonna stick there for a little bit longer. So in principle, for me personally, I think I only really have 1 book left on there at this point in time, and I do hope to get around to it in April. Actually, I should say, I'm actually kind of lying. I should say, out of those 6, I still had 3 left at the beginning of April, but actually at the time of filming I only have 2 left. So I'm doing very well with that goal. I will say that I kind of have made an adjustment to that goal to some extent, and that is that I probably want to try and keep myself to just having 1 on there at all time. And so for me to have to finish that 1 before I'm able to buy another one. So that 1 book that I said I was going to be reading throughout the year kind of is excluded from that list, but so I still have 1 other left on that list. Once I finish that, then I can spend more credits on another book, for example. So I like that sort of rule. I like that feeling that I then will always have of, you know, that I'm not piling up 2021 books, that I'm getting through them more quickly. And then apart from those goals, I had a few intentions as well. As to the intentions, we're not doing that great, I think. So one of the intentions was looking more at authors' backlist. I have read a few backlisted books, but they were mainly because of subscription boxes, for example, or you know, they really weren't all that intentional, so I wouldn't say that I've completed that intention. Then I also wanted to read more books outside of my main genre. And you know, I always read diversely, so I would say that yes, I have read across 10 genres apparently. So in that sense, yes, I read across multiple genres, but it's not like I really tackled some of those genres. I mentioned sci-fi, for example. I have read 2 sci-fi novels so far this year, which, I mean, it's nice, you know, out of 30 books I read 2 so far already, but I wouldn't say that I've been consciously saying to myself like, yeah, make sure that you also pick up a sci-fi every once in a while because I want to explore that genre more often. That's definitely also not really been the case, so we'll have to see if that ends up picking up throughout the year. But as I said, those are kind of like intentions, so they're not really front and center in my mind at this point, and I definitely see that I didn't make those quantifiable goals the way that I did with the other goals, and so they're also not that front and center in my mind. They're also not that priorities. They're also not that important to me, clearly, but that is also why I set them as intentions rather than goals. Yeah, another intention, because I was kind of thinking there was another intention that I haven't mentioned. Another intention that I started out good with, but it has kind of fallen by the wayside now, is using my reading journal more. And I will blame the month of March for that, because in the month of March I got back into that sort of mindset of wanting to be reading all the time, and, you know, feeling like I could still fit in another book in the month and all of those things, rather than taking the time between reads to update my reading journal and put down my thoughts, or even while reading to do that. So I had been doing that quite well at the beginning of the year, and that has kind of been falling more and more to the wayside as the year has been progressing. So I definitely want to get back to that mindset of the beginning of the year, even if that means progressing through my physical TBR a little bit slower. I do want to take that time to really reflect on what I've been reading and to write down my thoughts in a reading journal. In terms of what I've been reading, I do want to kind of mention my favorite read so far. My favorite read this quarter has been Human Acts by Kang. I read this one in March, and it was one that I just like fit in because of Becca's Bookoplaton. It's probably one that I would have put off for a while if it wasn't for the random selection choosing this one for me, because I had like a mixed experience with Kang's The Vegetarian. But I love this one. This is an amazing read. It's all about the Gwangju uprising in 1980, an uprising mainly coming from the student body, but also having like farmers and laborers involved. And it was an uprising that was heavily put down by the army. A lot of people lost their lives in this uprising. A lot of people got imprisoned and were treated horribly at that time. And so this story dives into multiple perspectives at the time of the Gwangju uprising, also like 30 years in the future from the Gwangju uprising, people who are trying to get some of these stories out into the public. So I thought it was super strong. It is a difficult read because you can imagine it has very horrible acts taking place, but the way in which it is written also doesn't spare you at all. It is very hard to read. It is going to give you a bleak view of humanity. It is going to make you feel sick from time to time because it spares no prisoner. The first chapter in this story, for example, already gives you very vivid descriptions of corpses and of the way in which these bodies are prepared for identification, are made a little bit more presentable, but so the way in which that is described, definitely I wouldn't be eating anything when I'm reading this book, for example. So absolutely amazing. You should all be reading this. This is a great read, but definitely, as I said, there are a lot of trigger warnings with this one, so make sure you read it at the proper time, and if you find yourself having difficulty dealing with that, then put it down, of course. In terms of my worst read, I don't really have a worst read this year so far. I mean, I did put a book down. I put I Am a Cat by Soseki Natsume down because I was just really not able to focus on that, and that's like the second time that I tried to read that book. First time was 6 years ago or something when I tried to read it physically. I tried it via audio now, tried it via audio in combination with physical, and I just really couldn't put my mind on this book. And so even though it's a Japanese book about cats, this one didn't work for me. So yeah, sadly I put that one down. But in terms of the books that I actually finished so far in the first quarter of the year, there have been a few that have just left me like indifferent, as in like I like them and that's just it. But I guess my other answer should be The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, which is a book that kind of left me indifferent, but I also struggled to get through it. It's a book that I actually should have DNF'd because I wasn't able to DNF it because I had a friend who really loved this one, and it is a critically acclaimed book, so I was just like, maybe the ending is going to make me reevaluate my experience with this book, as has happened in the past, but that didn't end up happening with this book. So it was a slog for me to get through, and there were definitely elements that I liked, but not enough for me to be able to, for it to save my reading experience. But so yeah, I think that that is more or less what I want to talk to you guys about in terms of my goals, in terms of how much I've read so far this year. I could of course dive into some of the statistics in terms of how diversely I've been reading, but I think I'll save that for my mid-month check-in when I have more of a collection of books that I've read so far to talk about. But so yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know down below how your first quarter has been going. Have you been reading a lot of great books, and what has been your favorite read so far in the first 3 months of the year? But so yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you guys for a future one. Bye!